Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have Becca's Bookopoly round 13 with a brand new board. So if you are unfamiliar with Bookopoly, I have been running this series for a year. It is a bookish board game type thing that I use to pick my monthly TBRs. So as this is the first TBR of 2020, I have changed the entire board. This is a brand new board. Big shout out and big thank you to Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction, as she has actually done most of, actually all of, the text and the drawing on this board, because I'm not very good at that kind of thing. So if this is your first time seeing a Bookopoly video, then do not worry, because as this is a brand new board, I will be doing a whole new tour of the board and also a recap of the rules as we go into year 2 of Bookopoly. So something that will be a little bit different about this particular episode of Bookopoly is that I will not be doing a recap of December's rules and how well I did, because new year, new board, new me. So without further ado, let us get into the moment you have all been waiting for, which is a full tour of the brand new board. Okay guys, so welcome to Bookopoly 2.0. Some things are going to be familiar because they were on the last board, but I have moved a lot around. We have some new spaces, so I'm going to go through all of the squares, which may be a little bit repetitive in parts for those of you who have followed the series from the beginning. So as usual, my token will be my little Selena bookmark and she'll be starting on go. But as we did last year, I will start by explaining all of the property spaces and then we'll go back through and fill in all of the other locations. The first properties on this side are the Browns, and here we have the first of the changes. This was previously historical fiction. I have now split this down into 2 separate genres or categories because I felt like there were quite a few things missing from the board last year that I wanted to get onto this one. So the very first space we have is graphic novel or manga, and then the other brown will be middle grade. Then moving along to the light blues, or in this case purple, we have young adult fantasy, which has moved quite a long way actually because it was up here. Moving around to this side, the pinks were contemporary romance. We have now split these down a little bit, so I have 2 mystery thriller spaces and 1 horror, because I do still have quite a few thrillers that I would like to read, but over the last year I have also acquired a few horror books and I was struggling to fit those into my TBR somehow. The oranges are now science fiction, which was on the board before, but it was previously green. You will notice as we are going through that I have separated all of the fantasy and sci-fi. Previously it was clumped together around this side of the board, but I have made it so that there is a fantasy sci-fi area on every single side, just to spread it out a bit, because sci-fi and fantasy are the genres that I read the most of. Some of the most exciting changes to the board is the reds. These are 3 different genres. The first one we have is paranormal. I was going to put paranormal romance, but I do have some like detective paranormal series. My new favorite space on the board is fantasy romance. You guys may know that I have been desperate for fantasy romance recently, so I've added a dedicated space here. I was really struggling what to put as this last space, so we now have smut. Now I don't read smut typically. I read very dramatic romantic stories, but I don't think I've read anything that is exclusively smut since I was 19, which was 7 years ago. So now we have a dedicated space for smut. Not sure what I'm going to be reading if I land on that yet, but this one's going to be a wild ride. The yellows are exactly the same as they were. We have adult fantasy. I think these are the only ones that have stayed in exactly the same place, but with me moving everything else, I didn't really need to move these ones. Over on the greens, we have 2 contemporary or romance spaces. So as I said earlier, these were previously the pinks. These have just moved over to the other side of the board, and I have also split them down to include magical realism in the greens, just because I only have a few magical realism books that I would like to read, but it is something that I would like to get to, and I moved them with the contemporary because magical realism tends to be very much rooted in reality with just a few magical elements. And then the last property spaces are the dark blues. We have no more classics on this board. I'm going to have to integrate classics into every other category, and these are dystopia, because while dystopia is a subgenre of science fiction, there are quite a few dystopian stories out there, and it is a genre that I actually really love. So back at the beginning of the board for the rest of the spaces. So here we have go, which is the same as it was last time. If I land on go, I will be heading over to my Goodreads TBR and using a random number generator to pick a book off there. we have Community Shelf and we have Chance, exactly the same as we had last year. For Community Shelf, I have a stack here with 16 challenges in. You will have seen most of these challenges in various readathons, but it is that kind of fun and very specific challenge that I will have to find a book to fit for. Over here we have my Chance cards, and this is comprised of 8 books that I'm very excited to read and 8 books that I'm not as excited to read, and we're playing a game of chance when we pull one of these because I don't know which one I'm going to get. The tax spaces are exactly the same as they were last year. We have Read a Library book for the income tax, and we also have most recent purchase for the luxury tax. This one does say most recent purchase, but as it is last year, it is just the most recent book that I've acquired into my permanent collection. What I feel is one of the biggest changes to this board is the train stations. On the last board, they were different kinds of settings, and on this board, they are different kinds of inspirations, which you will see as we go through. So the first one on this board is current events. So this is a book inspired by current events. An example of this would be something like The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which was inspired or featured the Black Lives Matter movement. The train station over on this side is myth, lore and legend. This can be anything from a fairy tale retelling to anything that is deeply rooted in myth. A lot of fantasy stories have one or all of these elements, so that's the kind of story we will be using for this. Now on this side we have 4 fans of. This one is kind of the only exception in the train stations, in that this is less of an inspiration and more of a comparison. So when we land on 4 fans of, we will be looking for books that have been compared to other books. An example of what I mean is that often on fantasy books it will say somewhere 4 fans of Game of Thrones or 4 fans of Lord of the Rings. So I'll be trying to find a book that has that kind of comparison for fans of text on it. And then finally for the inspiration spaces, we have history. This one will be books that have been inspired by historical events. So back around this side, this corner space is viewer recommends, exactly the same as it was last time. I have just very recently published my entire own TBR video that I do every year. I will link it up in the cards for you guys, so you guys can go to that video, see what books I own, and let me know which of those books I should prioritize. And if I land on here, I will be randomly picking a comment from that video and reading that book. For the electric company, we once again have ebook or audiobook, and for this I will be utilizing my Scribd membership. Then on this side, the 2 corner spaces have changed from the last board. This one was previously 5-star predictions. It is now gifted. If I land on this, I will be reading a book that has been gifted to me by you guys. And this one is friend pick. It was previously book outside of my comfort zone. And on a normal Monopoly board, this is the jail space. So instead of it having something that I don't particularly want to read, I've changed it to something that is out of my control. And if I land on this, I will be asking one of my booktube friends to pick the book that I'm going to be reading this month. And then the final space, the only one that we haven't talked about, is the same as it was on last year's board, and that is the Waterworks, which is read one of Mum's books. My mum passed away in 2018. She was a very avid reader, and I pretty much inherited that from her. I have also inherited the majority of her books, so if I land on this, I can read one of her books. I also have the option of reading a book that she bought for me or a book from my childhood that she read to me. So the rules for Bookopoly 2.0 will be very similar to my previous rules. I'm not changing very much at all. So rule number 1 is that we will have 5 rolls every single month, and as with normal Monopoly, if I roll a double, then I will add an extra roll and an extra book onto my monthly TBR. Number 2 is that if I fail to complete a Bookopoly TBR in any month, I will have a punishment for the following month. Now this is pretty much the only thing that's going to be different in the second generation of Bookopoly. I am once again going to try my hardest to complete all of these TBRs. I mean, I went through a rough patch at the end of last year. I did really good for 6 months, but I have been listening to feedback from you guys, and most of you felt that I really needed to switch up the punishment. Now as of yet, I have not decided what my punishment for not completing my TBR will be, so please drop your suggestions in the comments. And the final kind of rule I have is that categories are open to interpretation. If I land on sci-fi and I choose to read a fantasy book that has a lot of sci-fi elements, that is okay. The categories are subject to my interpretation, as this is my game, it's my TBR. And now that we've covered all that, let us get into our first roll and find out what will be my first Bookopoly book of 2020. So as this is the first game with a brand new board, we will be starting on go. First roll. Double 2. Read a library book. So roll number 1, we rolled a double, because let me tell you guys, Bookopoly wants me to know that even though we have a new board, the spirit of Bookopoly is still with us and she still hates me. So roll number 1 is a library book, and for this I will be reading Birthday by Meredith Russo. Now Meredith Russo has been the subject of some controversy recently, however I believe that given the subject matter of the books that she writes, they are still worth reading as they do cover some pretty important topics. So interestingly enough, my first book of 2020 is a contemporary, which is a little bit strange for me. The story of this is that we follow 2 teenagers who were born on the same day in the same hospital and live very close to each other. Now I believe that this story does follow these teenagers across the period of 6 years on their birthday. On the cover of this book it does say that it is a love story. The only other aspect of the plot that I actually know about this is that one of the characters is trans, so I'm assuming that this will deal a lot with them coming to terms with their identity and growing into themselves. While I don't read a lot of contemporary, I do love contemporary that deals with difficult topics, so I have been excited for this one for a while and I'm excited that I can finally fit it into a TBR. Roll number 2, double 6. Read a science fiction. Roll number 2 is another double. Bookopoly is back with a vengeance. Maybe she's mad that I changed the board. However, it's not all bad because our second roll is a sci-fi. So I'm going to be reading a book that was gifted to me of the festive period. This book was gifted to me by Rebecca, so thank you very much for that. And that is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. So Becky Chambers is an author that I really like that writes character-driven science fiction. I read her entire Wayfarers trilogy last year and I really loved it. So when I saw that this was released, I really wanted to read it. Now this is very short, it is only a novella, and I'm not too sure about the plot of this because the reason that I wanted it is because of the person who writes it. That being said, I have a feeling that this is also a book that is going to deal a lot with identity, as this takes place in a future where science has made a breakthrough that allows humans to change themselves so that they are more likely to survive on different planets. This story does follow a woman who has undergone these changes and is now exploring other planets. That is pretty much all I know about this, but I'm pretty hopeful that I will love it as it is by Becky Chambers. Roll number 3. 3. Ooh, another science fiction. Roll number 3 was another science fiction, which is great because I'm loving science fiction at the moment. For this one, I will be combining the last 2 prompts, which is a library book and a sci-fi, and I will be reading Stronger, Faster and More Beautiful by Arwen Ellis Dayton. Now, this is a futuristic science fiction story that I believe starts not too far in the future, but throughout the course of the novel it goes further and further forward in time, and I think that this is formatted almost as 6 short stories that follow 6 different people across this time span. And this book is talking about genetics and how in the near future we may be able to alter our genetics in certain ways and how that may continue to progress throughout the future. I believe that all 6 character stories in here are intertwined. I've really been loving science fiction recently because of the speculative nature of it, and I just find it completely fascinating. Roll number 4. 11. Friend pick. Now roll number 4 is our very first friend pick, and just to show how prepared I am, here's one I made earlier. So this is Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction, as I'm sure you know, who just already happened to be here when I'm filming this video today. So while she is here, I thought it would be kind of rude to ask somebody else to pick me a book. So Ashley will be picking my book today. Also, if you want more Bookopoly in your life in January 2020, then head over to Ashley's channel and she may or may not have something to show you guys. So yeah, Ashley's gonna be picking a book today. I'm excited. Unless Ashley has something particular in mind, she's just gonna roam around and we'll see what she wants me to read in January.
I have ideas, but I'll have a browse.
Oh hi, didn't see you then.
No, I'm sticking with my first one.
Okay. So Ashley she's picked us a book, and it is one that we are very excited about on this channel. Would you like to show them what we got? Da, 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 da. Would you like to talk through why you chose this book?
Well, it's both a nice thing and slightly evil because
Yeah,
She large.
she chonky.
Me and Becca are going to be reading this together in January. I just thought it'd be nice and put it on your Bookopoly TBR.
Yeah, because it would have been a struggle otherwise.
Sarah J Maas's new book, which is House of Blood, no.
Earth and Blood.
Still mix that up.
Blood, it sounds like it should be Blood and Earth, but it's
I know.
Earth and Blood. Or Crescent City, as it is commonly being referred to.
This is Sarah J Maas's new book that's coming out on the 1st of March. This is an arc. This is a thing that happened.
I'm so excited.
And we will both be reading it. That'd be nice and put it on your Bookopoly TBR, but also she's huge. So
Have fun with that.
mixed opinions. Bye.
So in January, I will be reading House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, also known as my most anticipated release of 2020. And I'm very, very excited about this. So Sarah J Maas is my second favourite author, I want to say, but I have been a massive Sarah J Maas fan for the longest time. Now this is her first adult book, or her first officially adult book, because her books are pretty much adult anyway. I don't know too much about the plot of this because I didn't need to look into it to know that I wanted to read it. I expect it to be quite heavy on the romance aspects, but this is predominantly an adult urban fantasy. The synopsis on the back does make it sound, I don't want to say it, but it does make it sound a little bit like Shadowhunters, where we follow a character in a world where there are lots of different supernatural creatures. So that is all I know about this. I am so excited to be reading this book, no matter how enormous she may be, and I'm excited to tell you guys what I think of it.
You're welcome.
Roll number 5, 8, most recent purchase. So roll number 5 was to read my most recent purchase, or the most recent book that I have added to my permanent collection. Now this was pretty hard for me to figure out because it has just been Christmas and the festive period, so I did get quite a few books in December, but I believe that the last book that I was aware that I acquired was the very last book that I unboxed in my recent video where I opened all of my Amazon wishlist gifts from you guys, and the very last book in that video was Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. So this is a non-fiction, which is very strange for me. You won't see me reading non-fiction very often, and that is because pretty much the only non-fiction I read is by Caitlin Doughty. So if you don't know who Caitlin Doughty is, she is a mortician and a YouTuber. Her channel is Ask a Mortician, and I will link it in my description box down below. But I started watching Caitlin a while ago, and she makes very funny and very informative videos about death, funeral care, grief, the different death and funeral practices in different countries, and everything is really fascinating and interesting in a morbid way, I admit, but also really, really funny. So this is Caitlin's third book, and this one is a Q&A where she answered 35 questions from her youngest fans. Now, an example of some of the questions answered in here are, of course, will my cat eat my eyeballs? We also have, what happens if someone dies on a plane? Can we give grandma a Viking funeral? Why don't animals dig up all the graves? And will my hair keep growing in my coffin after I'm buried? So I'm a huge fan of Caitlin Doughty. I have really enjoyed her 2 previous books, and I'm very excited to be reading this one. And as I said, I did open this in my Amazon wishlist gift video, and this book was kindly gifted to me by Linda, so thank you very much, Linda, for this one. Roll number 6, 9, a chance card, which is The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman. So rule number 6, we have our first chance card of 2020, and this one was The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman. Now, as I mentioned in the tour of the board, I have 8 books that I'm excited to read and 8 that I'm not so excited to read, and thankfully this one was one of the ones that I am very excited to read. So The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman, this is a weird one for me to be excited about because it's not one of the things that I usually really love. It's not one of my favorite genres or anything like that. There's just something about this book that is really appealing to me, and while I've heard both positive and negative reviews on this, I still think I'm really gonna love it. So this is an urban fantasy that takes place in the state of New York, and it follows a girl who moves to a small town with her mother, and this town is where her mother is actually from. In this town we have something called the Devouring Gray, and I'm not sure if that is a fog or whether it is monsters that live in a fog, but the Gray does creep forward and infiltrate this town on a regular basis, and it is the job of the founding families of the town known to keep back the grey. For some reason, they seem to be having difficulty doing this, and our main character finds out that she is in fact a member of the founding families. That's all I know about this. I don't know, but I'm really excited, and I hope I enjoy this book as much as I think I'm going to. And hopefully our final roll, 11. Another science fiction. And then finally, roll number 7 was science fiction. And for this, I am going to be putting back on my TBR a book that you are sick to death of hearing about and sick to death of me putting on TBRs and not reading. But I promise, guys, I'm actually going to read it this time. And that, of course, is Obsidio by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I absolutely loved Illuminate last year. Very soon after that, I read Gemina. I absolutely loved that. This is now the 4th TBR that Obsidio has been on, and I still have not read it. However, in my defense, we all know I went completely off the rails reading-wise at the end of 2019, and a reason I have not read this yet is that I do listen to the audiobook at the same time as reading it physically. So when I don't have a lot of time, I can't really sit down, plug into an audiobook and just get completely absorbed in this world. So this is a young adult science fiction series that follows a different set of characters in every installment. Obsidio is the final book, and I'm not sure who the characters are that we follow in this installment. However, in the first book, we follow Katie and Ezra, who are teenagers who have just broken up when their planet is attacked. Now, they manage to evacuate onto a fleet of ships. However, they do end up on different ships. One of the ships is heavily damaged, which means that it cannot move very quickly through space, which causes problems as the ship that originally attacked their planet is now pursuing them at a faster pace than they can move. Like I said, loved Illuminate, loved Gemina, just really want to read Obsidio, but I promise, guys, I am definitely going to be reading it in January. So that is it for my first Bookopoly TBR of 2020 with the brand new board. Please let me know what you think of the board, if there are any spaces that you particularly like from the second generation of Bookopoly. And as usual, please let me know if you have read any of the books that are on my TBR for this month and what you thought of them. Please also don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.